Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us in tonight's webinar organized by the World Breeding Federation to discuss the very interesting topic of breeding values. We're really delighted that we had such a great response from you all. In fact, we had so many responses of people interested that we had to increase our Zoom subscription for this event, which I think is a very good indication of what an interesting topic this is. I hope you all enjoyed the video that we showed at the beginning. It, I think, shows a really interesting thing in terms of how many small breeders really achieve fantastic quality in their breeding. For several years now, all the top breeders and the Longines Breeding Awards winners have been breeders who breed only with one or two mares, one or two foals every year. And the question really is how do we achieve such high levels of quality as small breeders? And I think the answer is research, knowledge, understanding, the accessibility of the best stallions to all breeders now, thanks to breeding technologies, and really beginning to refine our breeding choices. And breeding values have become a fantastic tool for us breeders to be able to do that. And it's been a real pleasure to us to see how much resonance we had for this webinar, and we're really looking forward to tonight's discussions and also to your thoughts and ideas. So to introduce myself very briefly, those of you who don't know me, I'm Eva Brümer. I'm Vice President of the World Breeding Federation, and I look after our marketing and communications, which includes the website and it also includes our webinars. My team here to support everyone consists also of our General Manager, Nadine Brandner, who's been sending you all the emails and who's been doing all the hard work in the background to make this happen. So thank you so much, Nadine, and give us a wave. There she is. And also Morgane Libot, who's recently joined us. Hi, Morgane. So nice to see you online here. And Morgane and Nadine have been your email contacts throughout, and their email addresses are also there for you. Should you have any follow-up questions, do feel free to get in touch after the webinar. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Now, just a little bit of how this is going to work tonight before I introduce our speakers. We are in a webinar setting. That means that if you have any questions, the best place to put them is the chat. And the reason why we quite like to do it via the chat is that way nothing gets lost. So if you put a question in the chat, we will keep a record of that. If we end up with so many questions that we can't address them all on the evening, which sometimes happens, we're then able to email you afterwards and we're able to continue the conversation. For us to be able to do that, you have to make sure that you don't join anonymously, because then we don't know who you are when you're asking the questions. So do make sure that you're there with your full name so that we can find you and we can email you should that be appropriate. And apart from that, we very much invite you to ask questions. That's the whole point really of the webinar, to help us all to get a better understanding and to have an interesting discussion. There'll be a little bit of time after each presentation for you to ask some direct questions, and then there'll also be some time at the end of the webinar today to have a little bit further panel discussions and for you to ask further questions. Now, before I finally introduce our wonderful speakers, it would be really interesting to find out a little bit more about you who have joined us tonight. So we have actually prepared a little poll just to find out how many of our participants tonight are breeders. So I will just launch this poll. And if you just want to go and tell us whether you are a breeder or whether you're simply somebody who's really interested in breeding. Okay, so this is really interesting. We have about 64% of our participants tonight are in fact breeders, so that is the clear majority. But we also have a lot of people joining us who are just interested in breeding and who are obviously here to find a little bit more about it. And that's great. You're very welcome, because really one of the things that we are very interested in as breeders as well is to reach out to the non-breeders out there to make sure that, you know, everybody else who is involved in horses gains, you know, an understanding of the importance of breeding and of how our horses are made, where they come from, and what sort of decisions we as breeders are facing on a day-to-day basis. So you're all very welcome. As I said, if you have a question, just pop it in the chat and we will get to it as we are going forward with our discussion. And now let me finally introduce our lovely panelists and also the topics that we'll be speaking about. So first of all, from Holland, we will be joined by Bart. Bart, is it Ducro, Bart? What do you pronounce your surname?
Bart is perfect.
Bart is perfect.
Couldn't do it better. Thank you.
It's always, Dutch words can be difficult for us non-Dutch speakers. And Bart is going to talk about breeding values in terms of the background of how they have developed as a methodology, and also really explain why we actually need them. He's going to compare conventional breeding values with genomic values. So he will give us a lot of really exciting and interesting background. And I think it'll help us all to gain a much deeper understanding once we have discussed the difference between conventional and genomic breeding values. And Bart is assistant professor of animal breeding and genomics at Wageningen University. And his specialism is in teaching and research in horse breeding. And one of his main focuses really is breeding for better health and for biodiversity. And I think that's really interesting. I think biodiversity is something that must be close to all our hearts. And I think breeding values can actually become a tool for better biodiversity, as well as we're beginning to understand genomic breeding values much better. So thank you so much, Bart, for giving us a really interesting introduction. We will then move on to all the way to France, where we're joined by Benoit Chen. And Benoit is a highly experienced breeding manager at the Stade Français Stud-Book. He's joined the Stud-Book 20 years ago, and he has been in charge of the stallion selection program. And in fact, he has been leading the stallion testing for the Stade Français for 16 years. It is therefore perhaps not so surprising that Benoit is going to talk about the practical application of breeding values in the area of stallion selection, and how the breeding value, the indexes, which are the numbers that we get that give us the breeding values, are linked to performance and conformation. And he will give us a really interesting step-by-step guide on how to choose a stallion, making use of breeding values as a sort of information. So welcome, Benoit, and thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. And then finally, we're going to move to Germany, my home country, even though I've lived in Britain for many years. And in Germany, we will be joined by Theresa Doms-Warnecke. Hi, Theresa. Now, Theresa studied agricultural economics in Göttingen, and she then completed a doctorate in animal husbandry, where her doctoral thesis focused on the study of genetic and environmental factors on the fertility of mares and stallions. I mean, really interesting topic. And she, in fact, joined the German Equestrian Federation, the FN in Warendorf, and is now Deputy Managing Director of the breeding department at the FN. So welcome, Theresa, and thank you for giving us that perspective from Germany as well, which means that we've got, you know, three really big, flourishing and interesting breeding nations joining us tonight. So without further ado, I think it is time to launch into our first presentation, which comes from Holland. And Bart, I'll invite you to share your screen.
Thank you for the introduction. Like you already said, Eva, I'm going to talk about the most powerful tool of breeding programs, and that's going to be about the breeding values. So I'll take another pointer. I think that makes it easier. So the contents of my presentation is about what exactly is a breeding value, how you're going to construct it. That is an important issue, and that's mainly in the what I call the conventional setting, so that is without DNA tools. And what are the limitations if we are looking at conventional breeding values, and what will be the solution if we include genomics in that. So, and then I will discuss the advantages of the new construction in that sense. So first of all, why is the best performer? Why is it not always the best breeder? If so, then it would be very easy to breed. And then we also know that the progeny of this best performer should also be the best breeder for the next generation. That would be very nice. That is also, like you probably also know out in the field, that there are a few breeders who think that the best performer is indeed the best breeder, but it's not. And if it were, then breeding would be quite boring, wouldn't it? So luckily for us breeders, it's not the case. It's not that simple. So, and you can also wonder what exactly is the best. We are not only interested in the best jumper or the best dressage, but also it should be in good health. And maybe it shouldn't be that it is only the best performer at the Olympics, but also the one that is really persisting its high performing. So I will leave that discussion for itself, but and I just say we go for the best breeder, whatever that is. So in terms of breeding, what makes the performance of a horse? That is an interesting question. And then the basic equation you've probably seen before is an important to as a starting point from this discussion. So the performance or the phenotype, what we see from the outside of the horse, what we can measure, is a combination of the genetic predisposition and what we call the non-genetic factors, which we basically refer to as the environment of the horse. And the environment that is partly the training, the rearing, as the horse had any diseases during its rearing or currently, and what is its feeding. These are very important factors that also influence the phenotype. You can imagine if a horse, an outstanding breeding horse, has been through diseases or has been managed quite badly, it cannot express its genetic predisposition. So therefore it is important. But on the other end, also the genetic predisposition, that means the genes, basically, we don't know so much about it, basically. Even in this era of DNA, we don't know how many genes actually are underlying the genetic predisposition. We don't know where it is on the location, and we don't know the effect of each of these genes involved. So we can say the genetic predisposition is still unknown. Although we are quite good at looking at DNA, we don't know which out of these roughly 20,000 genes are really involved in the genetic ability of a horse when it comes to the traits we are interested in. So what we are doing, we estimate it from the phenotypes, and that's through this equation I just showed. And filtering out the disturbing factors of the environment, we come down to the genetic predisposition. And it is an estimation of what the genes that are involved in are. And since it is an estimation, we call it an estimated breeding value. And estimation means there is also a certain error involved in this estimation, in which I come to later. But basically it is, because of this equation, it is that the ranking on the breeding value is not the same as ranking on the performance. And that comes back to the basic question I started out with, that is the best performer also the best breeder? It doesn't have to. There is, of course, a relation between them, but it's not a one-to-one relation as it comes to that. Well, and then the next question is, how much breeding value is in the phenotype. And therefore we use the concept of the heritability, the H squared, you probably have heard about. And the H squared, the heritability, tells us how much of the phenotypic differences that we see between the horses is due to genetic differences. So it tells us the genetics parts in the phenotypic differences that we see. It's a fraction, so that means that it's a value between 0 and 1, or in terms of percentages, it's between 0 and 100%. And it is depending on the trait we are looking at. For instance, withers height is a rather high heritable trait with an heritability of roughly 0.6. So that means that 60% of the differences in withers height we see between horses is due to genetic differences, due to differences in their genes. For a trait like sports duration, so how long is a horse staying in sports, how long is its sports career, that is a much more complex trait than withers height. And there you see that the heritability is much lower, only 10%. And you can imagine it's a trait that is much longer going on, and it has a much longer period that is affected by all kinds of environmental factors, like diseases, like feeding, like management, and stuff like that. So therefore, the heritability is lower. And you can imagine that for traits like withers height with a high heritability, they easily can be changed through selection. We can easily, relatively easily, we can select for higher or taller horses or smaller horses. So that is the heritability, the concept of the heritability. And how does it look like in practice? So here we have an example. So suppose we have a horse that is measuring 1 meter 78, 178 centimeters, whereas the population is 165. So it is quite a tall horse for this population. And the heritability of this trait for this population is 0.76. Well, what will be the breeding value in this case for this specific horse? So the estimated breeding value is only, the genetics is only in the deviation from the population. So we take the individual phenotype, this 178 minus 165. This is the phenotypic superiority of this specific horse. And well, to what extent is it due to genetics? Then we multiply it with this heritability, and we can say that the genetic superiority of this horse is plus 8.7 centimeters. So this is its breeding value, and with it you can see that using this horse in breeding, it will increase the population height in this specific population. This EBV of this specific horse, we can also use it to say something about its progeny, its offspring. We can derive the breeding value of its offspring by stating that the breeding value of its offspring is, according to genetic theory, it's half of it is received from the sire and half of the dam. Well, and let's take in this case that the dam, we don't know anything about it, is just an average male. That means that we assume that it has an average height, withers height of 165 centimeters. And that means basically that it doesn't deviate from the population. Therefore, we have here a 0. Whereas for the sire, we have this 8.7 centimeters. And then times half, taking the average of it. We know from this source of information, the sire, we know that this offspring has an estimated breeding value of plus 4.35 centimeters. And we can also make a prediction of the phenotype. What do we expect from the size of this horse when it's fully grown? And that is plus 4.35 on top of the population mean, and that makes it 116.35 centimeters. So here you see an example that we can have different sources on which we base our breeding value. So here on the left-hand side, I had it on its what we call own performance of the horse, and we use it here on the right-hand side that this specific horse was the sire of an offspring. So we have different sources which we used in the breeding value estimation, and you can imagine that the different sources also has a different quality of the estimation. And for saying something, making inferences on the quality, we have introduced the term of reliability. The reliability refers to the quality of the breeding value. And again, this is a value between 0 and 100%. 0 means that the breeding value to which it is attached doesn't say anything about the breeding value of the horse. Whereas if it is 100%, then we know exactly the genetic predisposition for this specific horse. So that is the reliability that is often attached to a breeding value. And it is basically a function of the heritability. For traits with a high heritability, the reliability will automatically be higher. And next to that, it is related to the relation between the informant and the breeding candidate. So in this case, for instance, if we want to say something about the breeding value of this specific horse, and we use as an informant its progeny, then we should also account for the relationship between this horse and its progeny, which is R. And that means that the breeding value of this horse, based on the measurement on its progeny, should be multiplied by a half. We could also have an additional, maybe its father we can use. It's also a relationship of a half, and its performance can be also included in the breeding value of this specific horse. So we have multiple sources of information we can use to estimate breeding values for selection candidates, for instance, stallions. And the more we have, the more of these sources we have, the better the reliability, the quality of the breeding value will be. The more sources, the better. And we have, in case of breeding stallions, we have multiple offspring, and although they each of them have a relationship of a half to the selection candidate, the breeding stallion, like also its father has, because of the number of progeny we can have, the quality based on breeding value on measurements on its progeny will give a more reliable breeding value of the selection candidate in this case. So how does that work in practice with the reliability? For, say, a common stallion born at a such moment, we first will have a breeding value based on its parents or on its pedigree, so its family basically, and that will give a certain level of reliability, which is depending on the trait we are looking at in terms of its heritability. Then the stallion is making its own performance. So it starts competition, for instance, and looks very promising, and its reliability will increase by that. And once it has been approved as a breeding stallion, and it is producing progeny, its reliability will increase, etc. And the more of its progeny, the more reliable its breeding value will be. And the nice thing of this technique is that even for lowly heritable traits, like like for instance reproduction, disease resistance, we can even come with high reliable breeding values in the end, as long as we have many progeny we have tested. And for combining all these sources of information, and you can imagine there is also, they tell something about the breeding value of the selection candidate because they are partly sharing the same genes, but they are also having double information. There is overlapping information. And to manage that properly, we use the statistical technique, which is, in short, it's called blood. And therefore, blood breeding values is properly combining all these sources. And it is also, additionally, it is properly disentangling this genetic information from the non-genetic information, like the management and the feeding strategies and whatsoever. And that is the power of blood breeding values in that sense. With extra sources of information, the reliability of the breeding value will increase. That's for sure. But we don't know if the breeding value will go up or it will go down. So that is not what we can say in advance. So there is a change in the breeding value with additional information, but sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. If we have lowly reliable breeding values, so here in the beginning, then additional information will probably have larger changes in the breeding value than if we are in the end. So here, with high reliabilities, the changes in breeding value will be smaller as compared to in the beginning. That's something also you should have in mind. What a great system we have with these breeding values based on all these different kinds of sources of information. So that looks very promising. That looks very good. But in particular, in horse breeding, it has a quite significant downside. We have to wait for all this progeny, and if in case we are interested in sport traits, competition traits, we have to wait until they are performing in competition. So that is long waiting. And we know all horse breeders are very impatient, so they don't like to wait that long. So it's long waiting for the stallions, but for the mares and also for the young stallions, there is only few progeny is there that is already performing. So in particular for the young stallions and for the mares, it is difficult to get relative high reliability in this case. That makes it. So that is basically what is the limitation of conventional breeding, in which we don't use any DNA information. So let's go over to genomic breeding values. Genomic breeding values, that means that we are taking advance of that we are able to read the DNA profiles. And DNA profiles doesn't mean that we know each of the genes that are responsible for, in case of traits of sport competition, but we are able of detecting the differences between the genomes, the whole set of the DNA profiles of each individual horse, and we can detect these differences and we can report the differences. And you can best look at it as some kind of QR profiles. This QR profile, I'm sure that no one in the audience can read what is should be read here. I can't, nobody can. But we can see that there are differences in here. And we can use computer software to read these differences. And if we are able to read these differences and link them to differences in performances, then we have a system by which we can use these differences in DNA link them to differences in performance, and make some kind of breeding values out of it. So what we need is to make a link between the DNA differences that we see, and I just expressed them here as these QR codes, and link them to differences in performance. And for that, we need a reference population. We need to establish a reference population in which we have, on one hand, the DNA profiles of the individual horses, and on the other hand, we have their accompanying phenotypes. And it is just like some kind of a library where we have the phenotypes of the horses and they are linked to their DNA profiles. And what you see here. And if we have this library with all possible, not all, but very many possibilities of differences in the DNA linked to the differences in performance, then we can have our selection candidate for which we don't know what its breeding value is, but we do know its genotype. We just take a DNA sample of it, and we look in this large library. It's not so large here, but suppose it's very large. We look, okay, which set of the samples we have here are very close to the sample of the selection candidate. If we have figured out which one it is, then we can say, okay, this is very important. This is its predicted breeding value for the specific horse. So that is the concept of genomic breeding values. We need a reference population, that is for sure. So if we have figured out this, what are the advantages of it? Well, for each horse we can get this DNA sample, we can immediately find its breeding value with the same high reliability. So it is independent of its own performance or of its performance of its relatives. That is not relevant any longer. We can only, based on its DNA profile, we can give an estimate of its breeding value. So that means that also for mares with only few progeny, or even young foals who hasn't performed anything like that, we can have a breeding value estimated from this genomic library that we have created. So we need this reference population, and the size of the reference population that we use, that is determining the reliability of the breeding values that we get out of this system. And here you see the reliability depending on the size of the reference population with the different heritabilities. And as an example, suppose we have an heritability, or we have a trait with a heritability of 0.3, and we have a reference population of 4,000, so we should look at here. Then we are able, for a heritability trait of 0.3, we will have, for each animal in its population, we have a breeding value of with a reliability of 7%. Under the conventional system, that would correspond to the system that we have for each of our selection candidates. We have measured 30 progeny. So suppose that we want to select, for instance, 10 breeding stallions out of 100 candidates, that for each of these 100 candidates, we have to have measured its performance of 30 of its progeny. And we have to do that each round of selection. So on one hand, I can imagine that you are somewhat intimidated with the size of such a reference population of, say, 4,000. But if you, for 100 stallions, you have to measure 30 progeny, so it means also 3,000 progeny each round, each year again. Well, maybe this is a not so expensive alternative to think about. Okay, to sum up what I've been talking to, it's about breeding values, very important for breeding programs, the most important tool. it reflects the superiority, the genetic superiority your horse will pass on to its progeny. And we can predict the performance of its progeny. How good we can do that, it depends on its reliability, and it depends with it on the sources, the number of sources we have to calculate its reliability. And if we have a high reliability, we have fewer fluctuations in this breeding value. We saw the limitations, in particular that we have to wait so long for getting the progeny testing, which is the most important source of reliability, which means that there is room for improvement using genomic breeding values. It requires a reference population to make this genomic library, so to say, but once established, we are independent of phenotypes to make reliable breeding values, and these are available to all of the members of the population that we are working with. I hope I didn't take too much of your time, but thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Bart, and how interesting and really useful, I think, for us to see it broken down step by step as well. And particularly fascinating to think of the possibilities of genomic breeding values. I think especially, you know, for mare owners as well, and for people who like to evaluate their foals. So I think this is really exciting for all of us, for breeders small and large, as it were. So thank you for that. I think this was quite detailed. And I think a lot of food for thought for people. So we will, of course, make a recording of this webinar available afterwards. So if anybody wants to watch this section again, just to sort of really understand the math, that's, you know, of course, that will be a pleasure. Now, we have a couple of questions. One of them is very long and in German, so I'm going to have to take a minute to read it and translate it. And the other one is in English, and it's from Christina. Christina would like to know whether the breeding values for mares are conventionally bred mares not disadvantaged by this calculation as they have less offspring than your embryo transfer or ICSI mares, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's indeed a good question. You're quite right that under the conventional system, in which the value of the progeny testing, the progeny information to estimate breeding values is really high, and therefore most of the improvement in a stud book is through the stallion selection, and that is the disadvantage for mares. That is correct. So in case of ICSI and also multiple ovulations, so we have a much higher number of progeny from the mares, that indeed could help to improve the breeding value of the mares. But it's mainly to the individual mares. So what is the contribution to the genetic progress in the stud book? Yeah, how often is ICSI and multiple ovulations is applied? And it's not to all the mares, it is only to the elite mares, I would say. So yes, indeed, to the individual mares, it will certainly improve its reliability, that's for sure.
That's really interesting, thank you. And of course, for many of us breeders, it's really the mares that we are thinking about, you know, when we're looking at our own breeding material in front of us, as it were. So a lot of food for thought there. Now, Marina's question is really about the complexity, I think, of performance measuring, and also the problem perhaps that in different countries there are very different approaches to that. And I think, Marina, that's an excellent point. And I think this is exactly why we're sitting here all together with, you know, speakers from 3 different countries, because that is indeed a really important question. You know, what ideas could there be to bring together these different approaches from different countries?
I'm just reading Marina's chat. Yes, indeed, you're quite right, Marina. That okay, we prefer to show how it works with Withersheim, because that's such an easy measure and everybody understands that. But the advantage, the benefit of genomic selection is in particular for those lowly heritable traits, and that's in particular, I think, for health traits which have quite a low heritability, and which is also very much depending on the environment. And well, think of osteochondrosis, for which the Dutch One Blood Horse Studbook has established its genomic selection program, which is independent of its phenotype. There you see the benefit of establishing such a breeding program, because it is pretty expensive to measure progeny for each breeding stallion candidate, and you need, for instance, 30 of its progeny. That makes it a very expensive trait. So then you see the benefit of a genomic selection program. Yeah. So I can imagine, in particular, if you talk about health traits, that collaboration across studbooks would be highly beneficial. Yeah. And if I may add a personal statement to that is on my own, that is that, okay, I'm fully aware of the competition among studbooks, but I think maybe on traits like health and welfare, maybe we shouldn't compete. I think if it is in all of the studbooks benefit if we have if we really can deal with health and welfare to get it at an acceptable level, to make it justifiable that we are still breeding sport horses towards the society.
Yeah, I think, thank you very much, Bart, for that, because this is really something that we at the World Breeding Federation have been very keen in recent years to work on, how we can collaborate to have a better understanding of how we can benefit sport horse breeding, particularly from a health perspective. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. These considerations should override any notion of competition. And I think that sort of touches a little bit also on the question we just had from Christina, where she's worried about foals that don't have the so-called right genes, and whether that is controversial concerning welfare. I think when it comes to using genomic selection as a tool to improve health, then that of course drives welfare in a positive way. Now, I think we need to move on now to our next presentation, as I think we're having already a really interesting conversation, but it would be really interesting now, I think, to move on and look at how this relates to stallion selections. And also, I'm afraid we don't have all the time in the world. But thank you so much to Bart for your fascinating presentation, and thank you to all of your great questions. I think what we'll do is we'll have some more discussion at the end of today's webinar, and then of course there's always a possibility to follow on via email. So thank you very much, everybody, and I'm now going to pass you all over to Benoit, who is going to give his presentation about stallion selections.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much. So yes, good evening, everybody, again. And I am Benoit Chen, breeding manager of the Studbook Stade Français, and I will present you the Stade Français breeding value and crossbreeding tools for breeders. So two areas of focus have been developed for breeders. So first point was the breeding value link with sports performance, with jumping, eventing, dressage, and with the phenotypic index and the genetic index, the estimated breeding value. On the other part, we have breeding value linked with conformation, paces, and jumping ability, with also estimated breeding value. So first of all, let's focus on performance index. Okay, all sports results of the Français horses are registered in a database. So it is nearly 60,000 horses a year. And the horses are classified according to their level of performance and their results in national competition and also international competition. Jumping is 1.45 meters and above. So here the name of our genetic index, phenotypic index, jumping, eventing, dressage. So the 50 best horse have a phenotypic index, performance index 100 and more. If you get to the 12% best horses, so it's 150, 120 and more, and the two best have a phenotypic index of 140 and more. So this is useful for breeder and rider and owner that we know the sport level reached by a horse, and it is calculated each year. And in the end, we take the best phenotypic performance index of a horse during his career. And the second point, as breeder, so we can evaluate the quality of the production of a stallion we have the number of progeny that are under 100, between 100 and 120, 120 to 140, and over 140. So it was the phenotypic index. Then on the other part, we have the genetics index, though that Bart told us the ability of a stallion and bull mare to pass along the quality for sport. And there, so we take into account the sporting results of the stallion itself, but also all the family, parents, creator, offspring, and with environmental effect that Bart told us. So, and so there is heritability of those criteria and for competition also. So we can estimate whether a stallion or a mare has a greater or lesser probability of producing efficient horses. So the estimated breeding value. So it can be negative or it can be positive. So in France, so the mean is 0. So if the estimated breeding value of a horse for sports is at 15 and more, we have the 5% best stallion. And when we reach 20, we have the 2% best stallion on the estimated breeding value for sports. So one point of focus of like Bart told us also, this is a probability. So we have to take account the reliability, of course. And when a stallion is young, well, we know with his parents, and then more and more, there are the parents, and then the stallion goes and make their own performance, and then he has the product that compete, and then the reliability become better and better. So with that data, the studbook built a range of tools for breeders, and they are available on the website etalonsf.fr. So first of all, we have stallion ranking for jumping and eventing. And what are, here you are the stallion, what are the main information in it? So here you have the performance index reached by the 25% best offspring of the stallion. This is the performance index, so you say 100, here we are 140, the 25 best percent offspring of this stallion. Also, you have the distribution of offspring performance index with the, like we saw former, percentage over 140, between 139 to 120, percentage between 119 and 100, and under 100. Other information in this part, you have the estimated breeding value here with the estimating breeding value itself and the reliability on the other part. Other tool that we created also stallion sheets. For example, you have the Miller Cartago sheet here So with different information, which you have the number and age of the offspring in total and in competition here. And also you have the detailed performance of the progeny with the reference population are all self-français approved stallions, like in gray and blue. Blue is the horse, the stallion himself. So you have also the scale here from 100 and over 100, other 150. So detailed performance progeny in jumping in comparison with the other stallion. And yeah, when present, it is at least minimum 50 offspring by stallion. And also in eventing with the minimum 25 offspring in competition. Other information in this file, you have the number of progeny, the top 2000 WBFSH ranking since 2004. And also, of course, the estimated breeding value of the stallion in jumping with the reliability and in eventing here. So the data also are available from the IAFC, the Technical Institute for Horses in France. So you here again, Miller-Cortago. And then in that data, which is you can find on ifc.fr, you have general information, all the pedigree and relative horses, the ability, the same data, the breeding information, how many colts and so on, your buyer, and the progeny, and also the genetic diversity. There we can find all the information in this website. So that was the performance part. So after the performance data, let's talk about the quality of conformation, gaits, and jumping ability we are looking for. So we built again a genetic index related to quality. We are looking for a stallion. And also this genetic index gave for the conformation, we have 9 traits about conformation. We gave this genetic index for in each part with the head coupling, anterior part. Also, there are 9 traits. They also croup, height, here, the the joint, the forelimb, the back limb, the overall impression, and sheet. Also, for movement, the gaits. So you have walk, trot, and canter. And for the free jumping ability, we have 4 traits with the balance, strength, style, and behavior. And you have also EBV for each point and for this stallion. And you got on the right part, you got the reliability of the EBV. So in practical, what could be the practical use of these tools by breeder? And okay, I am a breeder, and how this tool will be helpful to choose the best stallion for my broodmare. So we can have an example of practical application. So, and different step of breeding tools, you have different steps and the breeding tools related to them. First of all, okay, at the beginning, just during winter, I start with the list of all the stallions that could interest me. So for them, this start from stallion 1 to stallion 25. Yes, first step of the first selection, what is my main breeding goal? Do I want to sell the foal when he's full, or sell the horse when they are 2 or 3 years old, or little later when they are 4, 5, 6 and older? Or if the production is for myself and for my sons or like that. That is first question. And one tool you can have also in the different state books, say which stallions are approved to produce in the breed. So I got a first selection. Second step, okay, this is the bloodlines, or which stallions are compatible or incompatible with my mare bloodline. So this is the tool linked with that. All the pedigree information I can get different internet also, and the inbreed rate. So next selection. Oh, okay, next list of my stallion. Next step, okay, third selection. Okay, this is a genetic level and sport and the quality of progeny I can see for the stallion, and that we just saw. And here you can use the genetic tools, the phenotypic, the genetic breeding value, the stallion ranking, the stallion sheets, all this part and tool linked with the genetic. So again, the list of the stallion decreased a little bit. Then we got this first step, or the qualities I look for: conformation, gaits, jumping ability. Also, here I can use the genetic breeding value for all this part of conformation and that. Again, the list is shortening. And the fifth step would be what all that's linked with the breeding and economy, the fertility of the stallion, fresh or frozen semen, the price, and stallion owner and insemination center services. Up again, a new list. And finally, I come to the sixth place. So with these some stallions left, okay, I have the good care choice, and I will choose the best stallion for my mare. So this is an example of an application in which the crossbreeding tools and breeding value can help breeders to choose their stallion. Okay, and I thank you for your attention. I will be pleased to answer your question. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Benoit. That was really fascinating. And what great work has been done by the Selle Française to make all this information available to breeders. That's really nice. And I think we're all going to have a look on the website now and just see how it's all broken down. And thank you for explaining that process to us. I don't know whether there are any questions from the crowd. Just pop it in the Q&A if you do have questions, or we can always return to that later when we have our discussion at the end of today. But I think it's really nice to go through this process step by step and to see how really these breeding values have got a very practical application. And also that, of course, we can break down the breeding values. So when you have a mare and you know already what you want to work on, say, for example, you want to specifically improve the canter, then, of course, you can use this tool to drill down not just to the overall breeding value for the stallion, but also to the specific area you want to work on. Marina has got a question for you, Benoit. What trait do you use to calculate the phenotypic index?
Yes, so for the phenotypic index, so the result in competition of the horses, and we have also the combination between the level reached by a horse and how was the ranking in the different competition combination. And also you have a difference with the age. It's not the same level with the 4-year-old, 5-year-olds, or then after on the international competition. So there are different weights of all these points to bring and to reach the statistic information in the end, and to get the 100, 120, 130, 140 index, phenotypic index.
I think that's really interesting. It's a very good question, because I think that's where maybe in different stud books we have slightly different approaches on how performance data is, what performance data is used, and how it's weighted, etc. And if maybe some more information exchange between stud books would be really
sure helpful. And also you have the weight and the comparison between the horse you met in the competition. If a really high level horse will compete in low competition, of course, it will win all the competition. But he competed with horses which we have more less the level is lower. So in that point, he will get less point that he will compete with the horses of the same level. Okay. It's always and all this calculation is made by the IHC and the research center where we work with.
Really interesting. Thank you so much for that answer.
You're welcome.
And I think a lot of food for thought for us. Kathy has got a question. Have you seen that the blue conflicts with genomic breeding values at all? And if so, how much and which one do you use?
At the moment, the genomic values, we just started it. It was in France, it was at the research project. So we get a first step with we are genomic for 3,000 horses. So we are started to get the new information in the EBV for sports. So we will have some small component in the coming year. And again, we are started a new project with all the other traits like Bart said on health and also. And in France, we have decided for these common traits to work all together. So we will work with sport horses, draft horses, race horses, and ponies. And this program is just started.
Fantastic! How interesting.
And so he's a 2-year-old program and two-year program, sorry, and it will last for 2 years. And okay, I think we will communicate on it. So if you want to get the information in the coming months.
I think we want to hear more, Benoit, as this progresses. I think it's really exciting, and we'd like to follow the progress. And I'm sure everybody else will be fascinated to hear more as you carry on. So this sounds really, really worthwhile and interesting. Thank you so much. And I think without much further ado, we're going to move to Germany now. And we're going to welcome Teresa, who is going to give us her perspective and is going to tell us more about how things are progressing over there.
Okay, thanks. I hope you can see my slides, my first one. Okay. Thanks. Okay, good evening, everybody, and thanks for your invitation. And I would like to introduce you to the breeding value estimation in Germany today. I think the next one. First of all, I would like to introduce you to the breeding program for the German horse breeding. This graphic shows that we are having the classical step selection. You see 4 steps for stallions and mares. And today we are talking about the selection step 4 that is the estimation of the breeding value with the selection traits of the competitions and breeding tests. Okay, and breeding values, what is that? Breeding values are the hereditary influence of animals on the performance of their offsprings. That is a definition in the animal breeding law in Germany. Or simply described, breeding values are expected value for the performance of offspring. Now, the most important things is, of course, the data, what is available and can be used for a breeding value estimation. Then I talk about the model and the results. Okay, and in Germany, the following data is available. Sport events, so we have show jumping and dressage competitions and all tournaments, respectively, competitions for show jumping and dressage, which are recorded by the data system, TORIS, are considered from 1994 onwards. This recording allows a ranking of all started horses. The trait used is a rank achieved within all starters in competition. And on the other side, we have show jumping and dressage of young horses competitions. The trait considered is a score achieved within the competition. And the next one is the breeding part, the breeding data of the performance test breeding. That is the own performance test of mares and stallions. The traits are the scores for walk, trot, canter, rideability, and free jumping. And in case of stallion performance test, also parcours jumping. And the last one, since 2019, we have the possibility to combine international and national sport data for a third breeding value estimation in Germany. We get the results of the German horses from the FEI, and the trait is the highest level in competition. So now you can see that there are 3 different breeding value estimations in Germany. Once the breeding value estimation of national show and jumping and dressage competitions, and then the breeding value estimation of national show jumping and dressage competition for young horses, combined with the breeding test of stallions and mares. And the third breeding value estimation results from the international and national sport data of the German horses. Okay, first of all, I would like to present you the breeding value estimation with the national data. In total, we have provided data from over 300,000 horses and almost 500,000 competitions for the estimation for breeding values in the national show jumping. In the dressage, there is a little less information. You see almost 280,000 horses and almost 350,000 competitions. The breeding value estimation for young horses in national sport include more than 250,000 show jumpers and 155,000 dressage horses. Oh, sorry. And from a total of 113,000 stallions and mares, there is breeding information for the breeding value estimation. As you can see, there is a lot of data, and we are grateful to the sport that we can get this data for the breeding estimation. And now, what happened? What happens to the data now? I would like to try to explain this black box to you in a little more detail. So, first of all, we see the horse's performance and now try to separate that performance. We want now, we want to know the horse breeding value fairly accurately, so we can now consider a few factors that influence the performance. First of all, we know who was a competitor in the horse test and what level the horse were. In addition, we can take into account whether Ludger Beerbaum or I rode the horse, and we know the level of the rider based on the performance class. And then we know whether it was a stallion, a mare, or a gelding, also the sex of the horse, and how old the horse was. So we can therefore take these effects into account when estimating the breeding value. Through the repeated performance of the horse in the sport, we can also consider the permanent effect, such as the general training of the horse, maybe the equitation of the horse. And the daily form is then the random residual effect affecting performance. This effect cannot be identified. Okay, and then we have an animal model. So what else can the model do? It is an animal model. It takes into account all pedigree relationships and uses all available information. The performance information from the parents, what also from the the next one, and also from the grandparents and half brothers and sisters. Of course, the performance of the offspring is also very important. So all pedigree information will be taken into account. You have already learned from Bart that genetic parameters are very important for estimating breeding values. Here you can see our genetic parameters. the different heritabilities of the sport shows and breeding tests. The black circles show the differences in sport shows. The environmental effects are large and the heritability small, 4 and 8%, you can see it. In the breeding test, the heritability is higher, up to 40% in the parkour jumping. You can see it here in the end of this slide. Then there are genetic correlation between the traits. Thus, breeding values can also be estimated for all traits. Also, there may be no information from the horse on the trait. So the genetic correlation vary from 0.4 parkour jumping to walk. You can see it here, or to almost 0.70 trot to canter or jumping to parkour jumping. There are the genetic correlation in the German breeding value estimation. Okay, now the breeding value estimation is no longer a black box for you, because you know that is a BLUP model, that is the best linear unbased prediction with a multi-trait repeatability animal model. That is what you know then. The next question is, what results do we get and what do we do with them? In Germany, we have a success data online platform that we called FN Erfolgsdaten. So the breeding values of the stallions are published on this online platform in the free area. So you can see and can get a lot of information about the stallions here, the data from breeding and sport that can be used for the breeding value estimation. Here you can clearly see that breeding values are over 100 points and they are marked in green. And in this example, for all jumping traits, all points, all traits are marked in green, and there are over 100 points. For this example, in dressage, these stallions is herited below average. You can see it in red, and so that is a stallion sire for jumping traits. Okay. Now I would like to show you the latest. No, I would like to show you the latest breeding value estimation, the estimation with the national and international competitions. The trait is here the highest level in competition. We call it HEC. That is a short form in Germany. And yes, the trait is highest level in competition. Now, at the last estimation in 2022, we have over 744,000 start of German horses abroad. That is only German horses starts in competition. And in this estimation, every German horse gets points depending on its performance at each start. You can see it here. The example shows the highest class in jumping over 160 meters. If the horse started 3 times in a 5-star class jumping, then the horse gets 8 points. If the horse has won such a competition 3 times, it gets a score of 8.6. So you can see for the breeding value estimation, there are points according to this table here. And now And here are also influencing effects that can be taken into account when estimating this breeding value. That is the age of the horse at its last start, and the sex of the horse. And here we have the rest too, which we cannot explain with the system. Okay, and you already know how the results are presented. These breeding values can also be found in the FN Erfolgsdaten success database. And now the estimation always results in a breeding value for all horses, but we do not publish all breeding values. This is done to protect breeders from working without uncertainly estimated breeding values. So in Germany, is it following values are published. In addition, breeding values are only published for stallions, and if reliability is at least 70%, and there are in total at least 5 offspring having performance. That is the reason, and only 1 stallion is published then. And the FN published the breeding value once a year in cooperation with the VIT data center in Verden. And the next question is, how is used the breeding values? With the breeding values, you can form the elite group of breeding stallions. For this reason, we always publish the threshold of the best to show the best stallion in group. Here you can see we publish the 1% or 5% of the best, and not only the best 3 stallions in 1 year. As you already know, we publish these breeding values in the FN Erfolgsdaten for each stallion, and the list with the best stallions are also published on our homepage. And the breeder societies in Germany also have corresponding publication in their website or magazines and so on. Okay. And in theory and hopefully also in practice, the elite mating is then carried out with the help of the breeding values. Then we can expect breeding progress then. Finally, I would like to point out the advantage of breeding values and the disadvantage of prize money. What are the reasons against the prize money? We have no relation to age and no differentiation according to prize money, dressage, and jumping. There is selected data material, placed horses only, and no consideration of number and level of competitions is there, and no consideration of quality of the rider, and yes, no environmental influences. That is a problem with use the prize money only. On the other side, we know it since today that there are many reasons for, or good reasons for breeding values. We have information for younger stallions or horses and all of horses that we have started. We can consider influence effects, we saw it, and we can compare performance over years and stations. So we have more information about the horses and yes, the young horses. But I think breeding success is not only reachable through breeding values, but also through your breeding eye and your decision. And I think the breeders have as well lots of luck yes, to have a good marting and good horses in future. Okay, thanks for your attention, and yes, you are welcome.
Thank you so much, Teresa, and how fascinating. I mean, particularly the amount of data you have in Germany for German horses is really phenomenal. And
Yes.
And I think that's something to bear in mind if we think back on our earlier presentations, which were quite clearly focused on the fact that really, you know, the more data we have, the more we can refine our breeding values. So I think, you know, looking at the German example is certainly fascinating. Now we have a question from Christina for you, and that is, she noticed that you are looking at jumping and dressage results, but not at eventing, which is of course something that, for example, we saw used in the Selle Français. They actually do look at eventing as well. Is there a particular reason why in Germany you're not looking at eventing data at the moment?
Yeah, that is a good question, because we have a lot of data of eventing competitors, but that was a project, a scientific project, and the results are very good. But yeah, yes, it was not good enough to use it in the practice. So we can combine the dressage and the jumping values. You can search a stallion with good breeding values in dressage and jumping, but at the moment not in eventing.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. And I'm sure, you know, as things progress and as we're getting better and better and as we're refining, you know, I think hopefully there'll be some better, more reliable results for eventing as well. I know eventing has always been a little bit tricky. I think we see this in a lot of stud books because you have so many traits that you're considering at the same time. So actually jumping and dressage ability are two very relevant factors, aren't they? I have a question here from Emma. She would like to know, with all that access to data, how come that the FN have not combined this into an integrated breeding value? Yeah, so question to you, Teresa. Why no integrated breeding value in Germany yet?
Yeah, okay. Okay, we combined the national sport data for the young horses that combines the breeding test or the results of breeding test and show jumping and dressage for young horses. But the other one, the estimation with international national sport results that are the different trait. So we can't do it or we can't combine these traits. That is not possible. So that is, there are separate the estimation.
Okay,
because
thank you.
Different traits are there.
Yeah. And that's, I think, is comparability of data is a big challenge. And I think this leads us to a question from Eric, who would like to know where we are in a comparative index with multiple breeds. I think that's probably a question for everyone. Yeah. How can we do this? I think particularly if we're thinking about the fact that reference populations are often quite specific, aren't they, to a particular genetic group? And so how could it be done? How can we get to do this across a wider range of breeds? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the different breeds is maybe the question about the international value estimation. So I think that is a good project for the WBFSH. I think, that is in planning as a scientific project, I think so.
Yeah, you're right. And I think it is certainly a challenge that I think we need to tackle. Now, speaking of challenges, we have run out of time, everyone. In fact, we have already run over by half an hour. So thank you very much to all of you for staying on with us for so long and for listening. And thank you so much to our speakers for 3 really fascinating presentations. I think there is a lot for us to take away from this discussion today and to think about. If anybody here has got any follow-on questions, feel free to email us. Now, I think the correct email address, and Nadine will correct me if I'm wrong, is events@wbfsh.com. This is the email address you also had in your invitation email to the webinar. So please do feel free to email us. Also, you know, we are more than happy to have any follow-on discussions with you individually. All of you who have asked questions and who would like to talk a little bit more about the subject, please do stay in touch. And also, if there are any particular things you found interesting and inspiring tonight and you'd like to hear more about, email us. We're more than happy to put on more of these webinars because we think they're a fantastic opportunity to get to know about the work in different countries and bring everything together and to learn from each other. So a big, big thank to Bart, to Benoit, and to Teresa, who for all your hard work and for your wonderful presentations tonight. Big, big thank you also to Morgane and Nadine, who've done all the hard work in setting this up tonight. And of course, a really big thank you to our audience tonight for coming along. And yeah, watch out. There will be a video recording of tonight on our website. So do watch it again, you know, to delve deeper into some of the interesting points that were made. And thank you very much from me, and good night to all of you.